I got a good topic for you today, Zach.
That's great.
I had a client. We did hypnotherapy for the first time. And important to maybe note, sometimes therapists will feel a little bit regretful or maybe like question themselves if they're doing things correctly because they will not do hypnotherapy in the first session. And I have a client who has gone through a whole bunch of stuff and trying to figure out new life change. They're just kind of switching careers up. They used to be a performer and now they're going to be in event management stuff, and they're doing a really great job. But there's a lot of lack of trust for themselves because they had kind of a crash out sort of moment. They were doing big things in Vegas and then they're going to move to the next phase of their career with performance. And so they moved to Atlanta. Big stuff in Atlanta. It's where they film the Marvel stuff. And so it did not work out in Atlanta, and they had to move back to Florida in with their parents, and they're pushing it right up on 50 here, and so they're feeling a lot of man, I'm too old to be starting this stuff again. And so there's a lot of hesitation there, and so there was this desire to help them with hypnotherapy. They were interested in hypnotherapy, but they were a little bit I don't know if I want to do that yet. And so we didn't do hypnotherapy for 4 or 5 months. And then they got the big break. They're about to move, right, to they're going to Texas for this big job. They got the event, management, marketing work. And self-doubt started to creep back in. I was like, hey, listen, maybe it's time to revisit this hypnotherapy stuff. How do you feel about that? They're like, yeah, I don't know what that is. I don't know if I'm hypnotizable, but we can go for it. And I was like, yeah, you let me worry about that. We'll just go, And so I reminded them that there's this suggestion in hypnotherapy that it should feel like this, but that's just not true. It shouldn't necessarily feel like mind control or you totally lose your sense of self. That's what stage magic will tell you, but everyone experiences it different. And usually in the induction process for those kind of clients, I'll say, you may experience your mind speeding up. You may experience your mind slowing down. You may totally block out the external world, or you may become hyper aware of it. You may feel heavy in your body, or you may feel just unbelievably fidgety. And all responses are the exact response that you need in this moment, because your body and your subconscious is going to tell you some things. And so give them permission first. And so we did that. We had this great hypnotherapy session. They went and saw this house. I often like to start with a house because it's a real nice open metaphor, just open the door to this new part of the self. And so I asked them, I was do you want to open the door? Because I was feeling some resistance, observing their body. And they were they're like this on the couch, and I was and that's great. And I was and you can choose when is the right time to enter that door and not. And so they came back out, and they were just I do feel really calm. And they left, and they came back the next week. And when they came back the next week, they were just explosively happy and excited about everything. They were I went to the grocery store after our session, and I was trying to pick out my yogurt for breakfast, and I was just dancing in the aisle. And I was I haven't done this in 20 years. And they're and I've told everybody about you. I told this person, I told them you're a wizard, and I told them all to book a session with you. And they're just I don't know what the hell that was, but we need more of that in my life. And so I was this is amazing. But what happens in the therapist that the client does not know is I'm great. It's one thing to have a session that doesn't go well, and then to kind of pedal through that. But when you have a session that goes really well, you're oh man, the bar is set too high now. What am I gonna do now? It's almost I gotta top it, or I've gotta meet it at that level. I gotta meet this expectation. It was great when they thought hypnotherapy wasn't gonna work at all.
Yeah.
And then they come back and they're that was the greatest thing that's ever happened to me. And they're we need to do it again. I was oh man. And so I wanted to talk about that kind of unique experience that I don't think we've talked about on this podcast before, of what do you do when you have an overwhelming success? Because that imposter syndrome that you thought was bad in the beginning is almost worse when it works.
Yep.
So I just wanted to talk to you about that and see, have you had an experience like that? And do you have similar feelings?
Oh yeah, all the time. Christ.
You're thinking of a story, huh?
I'm 15.
That's so great. I would love if we just told stories too.
Well, I think that the basic premise of it is that the initial resistance is so strong because it's like the resistance of the work that I know that I need to do if I'm the client.
Yeah.
It's the resistance of to doing the work that I know that I need to do. That, given the experience of having done that work, and what life would be like after that work is done, it's so freeing. It's in the client's head. They're looking at it like, you did this to me.
Yeah.
And so I think that's where it starts off with this whole thing, the idea of like, that was magic. And it's like, no, I was finally in a space to where, as the client, I was finally in a space to where like, I'm free to do this work. There's no expectation of me. There's no challenge of me. There's no like failure that I can have there. It's just doing that work. But I'm still not able to put the responsibility of doing that work on myself.
It feels a lot like that. It's like, you fixed me. Keep fixing me. It's like,
I created the container.
Yeah.
I created the space for you to do that. I didn't do anything to you. And I'd say the same thing on both ends of that extreme, like when it's a massive failure or when it's a success. Because I think it's the same principle.
Yeah, but different.
Yeah.
Are you thinking of a story?
Yeah.
When you want to share?
Sure. I had this client that was like, counseling's not going to work, and kind of like that. I was like, we can do some hypnotherapy. No. Maybe 9 months to a year later, we finally did some hypnotherapy, and they just like came back and they were like, this thing that I've hesitated to do work on for the last 20 years. I just decided that that's not going to bother me anymore. It wasn't the hypnotherapy.
Whoa. Did they attribute it to the hypnotherapy?
No.
Oh, okay.
They actually said that it wasn't because of the hypnotherapy.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
And so it's kind of like that's another example of this like idea of the client like not like the locus of control is still outside of the client. It wasn't the hypnotherapy. It was just like I decided to not let that bother me anymore. And the client wasn't taking responsibility for being able to do that work. And so I wanted to be like, going back to your point about it's almost harder to the imposter syndrome. The client was like, I wanted to be like, no, that was because of the hypnotherapy, which is that same thing inside me as a therapist now.
What is?
If I was to say to the client, like, no, that was really the hypnotherapy. Like, why do you think you've been resistant to this? We do 2 sessions of hypnotherapy and then you just decide to like not let this bother you.
What a happy little coincidence.
If I said that and I really pushed that, I would be affirming to myself, like, this is something that I did. And I think the imposter syndrome would come in there. I mean, it wasn't because of the hypnotherapy, but because I created the space for her.
Yeah. It's a tough one. So what did you do with that client then? Like they're like, it wasn't the hypnotherapy. You just like let them hold on to that belief and just, did you do more hypnotherapy or like what was next?
I let them hold on to that belief, and then I asked if they wanted to do some more hypnotherapy, and they said yes.
Okay. And what did you do in the next hypnotherapy session then? If you can remember.
I don't remember like the specific images that I used, but we did hypnotherapy every session after that for months.
Sometimes that's tough for me. Of like, well, what am I gonna do this time? It's like I feel like I keep having to pull out tricks, and I'm like, I'm gonna run out of tricks here in a minute.
Yeah, I think as I remember it, I think that this client was just, I just did a lot of like belly to belly stuff.
What does that look like? If I could be a fly on the wall and like, how do you do hypnotherapy every session? I mean, I feel like even for me, like that's something I'm like not personally used to. Like doing hypnotherapy every session. We'll like do some hypnotherapy, and then we'll like talk through some of the practical stuff, and then they'll arrive at a new problem, and we'll do hypnotherapy, and then plod through some of the practical stuff. And so it's like, maybe my style is, I kind of need whatever their like life conflict is in order to do hypnotherapy. But just to like build upon the hypnotherapy without receiving the feedback, I feel like I need the feedback. And I do feel like a lot of the students want that too, of like, they'll tell me, they're like, it's so tough because I'm not talking to the client. So like, are the images I'm saying landing? Are we going the wrong direction? They want some of the feedback more so they can craft it. Like, where do you want to go? Like, I'm thinking a calm beach, but maybe that's not what you need. And so having that feedback that we get in conversation is not present in hypnotherapy, and that can be challenging and scary, especially when you're building upon a huge success.
Yeah. What I'll do is I'll still like do the same theme, like whatever it was that we were talking about before, but then ask them for one image that they had over the week that was challenging or something like that. And so
maybe ask them for the image, but then you play with the details of the image. That's nice.
Yeah.
Do you just ask them point blank period like that? Just like,
I'll usually coach them on it beforehand, like before we even start like the 4, 6, 8 weeks of hypnotherapy.
Okay. Could you talk through what that conversation kind of looks like? Just like if I was your client, like what would you coach me on as we're about to go into 8 weeks of hypnosis?
Yeah, I would challenge them and say
I don't have a script for that.
Yeah, I definitely don't think that it can be a script.
Yeah.
But what I'll do is I'll challenge them and say like, okay, it sounds like the underlying issue is this, and then we chisel it down a little bit. Okay, it sounds like the underlying issue is this. And then when we get to that like very, very like basic underlying issue, I'll say, all right, this is what I'd like to work on for the next 4, 6, 8 weeks.
And that first part's kind of in conversation over several weeks of counseling.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm tracking.
So, like we were just sharing this, one of the things that I'm working on right now is being okay with like going deeper and more vulnerable and being more mushy with people that are in my inner circle without getting to the point to where it's like, oh no, this is too vulnerable, I gotta go. And so if that's the thing that I'm working on with a client, I'd be like, all right, like, so it's the principle of hitting that wall and not saying I gotta run. Underlying issue there.
Yeah.
That's what we're working on.
Okay. Identified.
Then I might come up with a metaphor for that, with a scary bear. I don't know, I'm just pulling this out of my butt right now. A scary bear that you have a flute and you do a snake charming thing, but with this giant bear.
Okay.
And then the next week I'll say like, how did that go? We'll spend 10 minutes talking about it. When did this come up this week? Did you feel any of those emotions of wanting to run? When was it? Yes, it was at work. Fucking boss. And I'm like, great, stop. Let's get into that.
Yeah.
Tell me about your boss. Then I might do an image of, boss dressed up as a bear trying to scare people in the office.
So you're kind of bringing together the literal stuff with the metaphor of the bear, and so you kind of blended them.
Yeah.
Boss would look pretty funny with a couple bear ears on the head.
Yeah.
That's true.
Or a scary bear suit that turns into Winnie the Pooh.
Okay, yeah.
And then the next week I'd be like, hey, when did you feel that feeling this week? I didn't. Okay, well, let's talk about it more. I didn't feel it at all. Did you feel like you were in a rush? Yeah, I did feel like I was in a rush. My wife was like really wanting for the first time to be on time to this thing, and I didn't expect that I needed to be on time for this thing. Okay, let's do one with driving. Going down the road trying to get there, you go faster and 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 faster until it builds some of that anxiety, and it's like, you know what, let's take a break.
Not turn around and go home, but let's pull off, take a break.
then you have a picnic on the side of the road.
So you just keep hitting that same basic concept, but with different metaphors, or different. There's like a core struggle, but then you get to like explore it in different aspects of life. Like one being the personal of fighting the bear, and being a snake charmer, and then another one in the workplace, and the bear is the boss, and then another one feeling rushed, which is similar to the running away, but now it's in the partner box. And so then maybe the next session would be about friendships.
Yeah.
So you just keep kind of exploring pieces.
Yeah, and kind of going back to your first statement, and for everybody else, I think it's so important that we do this because we do this. I'll get to that here in a second, sorry.
Yeah.
I think that what happens is that clients feel a newfound freedom on the subject. And then they're like, I'm free, I'm done, because you fixed this one thing for me that I was struggling with.
Yes.
And that's why I want you to perform for me, because you fixed this.
Yes.
And I think that it's important to show them that the thing is not fixed just because you have some relief on one of these topics.
That's a great point to make. That's definitely what I was feeling.
Yeah.
Which is like, I feel like as counselors, we're really great when a client comes in and be like, this part of my life is miserable. But when they're like, wow, you really helped with that part of your life, I'm like, I base all my sessions off of someone coming in and telling me they're miserable. And now when you're telling me that I'm doing really well, I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
And so I actually find that a lot of my interns will discharge their clients.
Yes.
When they feel better. And I'm like, no. I was like, it's not about keeping the client in therapy forever. But if they go out with the expectation that everything is fixed and better, and then they run into the very next obstacle,
and
which we could predict, then all the self-doubt comes rushing back. And so what I did with the client when they came back after that hypnosis session I was talking about is I listened to them describe how they experienced their week very differently.
Yeah.
And I was listening for some of the patterns in the way that they described it. And so what I saw is they were describing this newfound sense of freedom. And I was like, wait a minute, there it is. We are super free and open, but you can't be totally free and open. Like that freedom and openness needs to be balanced with prudence, right? Like there's the right place and context to be free and open, and the wrong context. I was talking to an intern just this morning about this concept, and I was like, everything is good in its right space, right? And like, for example, it's very good and healthy to drink your water and then to go to the restroom. I was like, but I don't go to the bathroom in the middle of the hall, like out in front of the break room. That's going pee is good for you. But that's the wrong context, right? We go pee in the bathroom, right? There's nothing bad. And so people will label it though. It's like, oh, well, peeing is bad. No, that's not it. It's right context, right action, or right thing. And so what we explored with her in that session, where I was feeling a little bit overwhelmed by like, oh gosh, this was a roaring success and now I have to do it again, is I heard her excitement over her freedom, and I was like, we need some wisdom to be added to this experience of freedom.
Yeah.
And so I heard a slight comment that she said, and I didn't point it out then because I wanted to do it in the hypnosis, where she criticized herself for being so, what she called gullible. But it was really like she was just open to influence from her friends and her parents and her bosses and stuff. And, she was kind of critical of that. She's like, I don't know why I'm so open to that stuff. And I was like, there it is. The problem is not that you're open. Like that's one of your talents, but you can't just be open to everything. There needs to be wisdom to, this is the right context to be open, because this is a safe and wise place to be open, because I'm going to be filled with good things. Like the counseling room, good place to be open, versus my boss who just wants me to work more for less money. Not a good context to be open. And so I took her to an open field, and she was just really breathing in the rich, fresh air of this open field. But then I made her aware of the king that sits in the tower and has built a wall around this field to keep out the beasts.
Ooh.
And so and then that sort of transmuted into a metaphor about, her being an infant, and infants just soak up everything. There's no guardedness in an infant or a small child. And so then I had her see, because she's very sensitive because of her age, about like aging. And so I had her see herself holding an infant, because we did kind of like a hands coming together and fall into the lap
good.
experience. And so she saw the infant, and I had her see herself as really old. Lots of wrinkles and crunchiness and bags under the eyes, and just like a curmudgeon-y, like, old lady, and I was like, and she is so beautiful because she is so mean and bitter and angry towards everyone else because she knows how much that infant needs to be protected.
Yeah. Yep.
And you can be, and so then the suggestion was you can be both. You can be the open infant, and I also really appreciate that you can be the curmudgeon-y old woman too, because they both need to be in you.
So, question. I've noticed over the years that you are incredibly good at identifying where those judgments are in spaces where I think a lot of other people wouldn't identify where those judgments are.
Oh, thanks.
How do you go from that one, that her judgment of herself was such a small aspect that I think most people, especially new hypnotherapists and counselors, would just be like, okay. How do you go from identifying that judgment to having a metaphor about a king having built a wall to protect an old lady being curmudgeon-y over anybody hurting this baby?
Yeah, I guess in my head that seems natural, but it might not be for everybody.
I don't think that it is for a lot of people.
The first thing that comes to my head is something Dr. Robert Bollett used to say. He used to say, at least to me when I was his intern, he's like, healing lies in the opposite direction.
Great.
And so, she is resistant to being so open. She's like, I see my openness as a vulnerability. And so I'm like, well, that's interesting. I was like, well, how can I create a space for her to appreciate the openness, but in the right context, right? She is recognizing the vulnerability of openness, and she's defending against it through being judgmental of the openness. And I'm like, well, that's not the pattern that I want. I was like, instead, how can I develop healing in the opposite direction of appreciating the openness? But in order to appreciate the openness, she needs safety. What's a character that creates safety?
Great.
And so for me, I think, this is part of my brain not being able to see pictures. I don't see the pictures. I think of like the ideas, right? The idea of openness needs temperance and balance with somebody who's very closed, a king who builds walls. The idea of openness with an infant needs the counterbalance of a grumpy old woman who knows better than everybody else, and you can't talk to her about religion or politics because she knows too much and she's not open to new ideas. And so I think having those two come together and contrast in an experience in hypnosis, I think is often the direction that I go to, and that's how I kind of arrive at it. I break it down to the core idea of the thing and build it off of that.
Yeah, and what I would say to everybody that is so important about what Jesse just said is the just the opposite of a thing is not good.
No.
It's anytime our clients are coming to us with some sort of judgment, it's for that safety that you were talking about, for the protection. And just focusing in on that, like I see this so much with young interns.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, somebody's overstepping my boundary, so be firm with your boundary.
That might not be it.
Yeah, I think it rarely is. Well, just being firm with your boundary is not it.
Right.
It's like, well, why? I'm very curious about why you have this pattern of letting people step over your boundaries. So what is that? Maybe a desire for intimacy and connection.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe a feeling of like lostness. Maybe so many different things. And it's like, yeah, have boundaries. Like, I'm not going to do that. But this trend of just like, I don't like this trend of, I'm just going to go no contact. That might need to be what happens sometimes. But
Yes.
jumping to that, I think, is so dangerous, and oftentimes creates the same exact feeling that we were trying to avoid.
I think it's easier. Just going no contact is easier than having the conflict.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead.
So one of the things that I think that you're really good at is saying, yes, I validate the fact that this is a struggle. Here's the opposite of that struggle. How can you sit in between this, in that struggle, as you're moving forward with both of them?
Yeah, holding both. You know, that's like the idea of self-actualization, is to be and to freely move between all things, like all archetypes or all parts of the story. I can be the infant and the grumpy old woman. I can be the fertile open field and the king who creates walls, right? And so holding those two. But I think maybe another way to say that same idea that may be a little bit more accessible or easier to understand is, I don't believe, it's a core concept, I don't believe that anybody does something that is not with a positive intended outcome.
Absolutely.
Right? If I am being mean towards my openness, there is a reason for that that is good. And so any symptom, depression, anxiety, bad boundaries, all has some type of positive goal behind it. It's just the wrong way to accomplish that goal. Maybe this comes from my background in like behavior therapy stuff with kids. It's like, well, when the kid breaks the pencil and tears the book and throws it across the room, it's easy to just pick on that, but what is the child trying to do? 4 functions of behavior. They're trying to escape the homework. Yeah, me too, homie. Like, I don't want to do my clinical notes, but throwing my computer out a window is not the best way to avoid my clinical notes. The best way to avoid my clinical notes is to get them done, right?
Yeah.
And so with that child, we slowly shape it. It's like, hey, instead of breaking your pencil and throwing the book, what if you just said, break, please? And then as soon as that kid says, break, please, great, let's go take a break. Let's go play some video games. The parents all upset, be like, well, but they need to get their homework done. Okay, sure. They're not getting their homework done, right? They're also not getting their homework done when they take a break, but they stopped throwing the pencil and paper and they got 2 problems done before we took a break. So I'm gonna need you to cool it, okay? Because we're making progress here.
Yeah.
Clients do that to themselves. They're like, well, I'm not better yet. Okay, but your life was miserable and now it's like 2 degrees less miserable, so can you chill it? And so I think all that to say, maybe a different, more accessible way to say it is recognize the positive goal that the symptom has and then show a healthy way to achieve that. She wants safety for her openness, right? She's a performer. She's so good at absorbing everybody else's stuff and then acting it out on stage. That's her strength.
Yeah.
But I want her to be able to express that in a healthy way. But she's recognizing, her subconscious is, that I need safety for my openness and ability to rapidly absorb what's going on around me. The right way to do that is not to criticize my openness in my inner child. The right way is to also develop a character who can protect the inner child and say, not right here, buddy, we're going home. These are bad friends. And so I think that's how I arrive at these different things. Recognizing what is the positive goal.
Yeah.
I don't know, how's that sit with you?
Do
you think about it in that way? You think about it maybe in a different way, but I think arrive at the same sort of steps.
No, I 100%. I think it is about that balance, and we can be so reactive in this profession that we want to problem solve, that we focus in on a solution to whatever that behavior is, and instead of taking it with that perspective of balance, like there's a good thing behind this.
Yeah, you said it so well. We try and solve the behavior rather than recognizing the goal that the behavior was created to achieve.
Yeah.
Everything's like that. Our avoidance, our alcohol consumption, our social media consumption, our anxious attachment, our avoidant attachment, all has a positive goal behind it. It's just the wrong way to achieve it.
Yeah.
I got a friend who's trying to start a business, and they talk to me. They're like, Jess, I was thinking about doing this social skills group for kids, but I think I'm just gonna have to do it with adults because, this thing didn't work. I was like, homie, you tried one trial run of this during the Christmas break 4 kids and you didn't advertise it well, and so only like 1 or 2 people showed up, and you're saying like, I think it's the wrong direction. You didn't even try it yet. I was like, try it for a year, then tell me how it works, gather some good data, and then move forward. You know, I can see that you're trying to solve this problem, but just throwing it away is the wrong way to solve that problem.
It's tough.
You didn't even try it yet.
Yeah.
And that's an avoidance of their feelings of failure.
Yeah.
And so, well, we need to not intentionally fail, but throwing something away because it wasn't a roaring success in the first attempt is not the right way to solve that problem. So maybe it's a helpful way to think about your clients. Even when they have great successes, that can be stressful for the therapist.
Just as tough.
Yeah. Anything else to add to that?
I think that's great.
That's what I needed to say today. Yeah. Well, let us know your roaring successes, or the kind of like stump it, like where are you stumped in why is the client doing this? And let's brainstorm how we can solve, like, what is the healthy goal that they're trying to achieve? They just are going about it in the wrong way. Because I think that mindset has been crazy helpful for me, and I think it could be crazy helpful for you. Until then, we'll see you in the next one.
Bye.
Bye.